You are listening to Action Design, your monthly insight into the field of behavioral economics and its applications to the world around us. We bring you leading practitioners from all industries to discuss cutting-edge behavioral research and how to practically apply those concepts to the development of consumer products and public policy.
Yeah, let's get this started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Action Design Radio. I am your host, Erik Johnson. I also have, as with most times, Zarak Khan with me. Say hello, Zarak. That was a very emphatic hello. And we are super excited to have Adam Gilbert with us, founder of MyBodyTutor. And we're going to dive into kind of some real nitty-gritty stuff around kind of behavior change as it relates to kind of health and fitness. So, Adam, thanks a ton for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So I think we'll just kind of get started with a little bit of background stuff. So, tell us a little bit about, tell the audience just a little bit about your background, kind of what you do, and especially, this audience is specifically focused on kind of psychology and behavior change. So, a little bit of background of like what you do, how you got into it, and especially how you kind of got interested in like behavioral change and things like that.
Sure. So I'm the founder of MyBodyTutor. I started that in 2007. I was working for Ernst & Young at that point, and I was always the kind of go-to guy for health and fitness. I'd give my colleagues and clients and the partners I was working for advice, and it was always the same story. I'd see them a week or two later, and they'd always tell me, I'd ask them how they were doing, and it was always, well, I got caught up with work, or I got caught up with my kids, or I got caught up with, happy hours or whatever it was. There was always some sort of thing. And the thing was, these people had a great game plan. They told me they liked what I gave them, but they just couldn't stick with it. So that's when that started to get my wheels turning, because there was a huge gap between, the knowledge and then the action. So that got me thinking, how can we solve this problem? Before that, health and fitness has just always been a huge passion of mine. My father, had a heart attack. He had triple bypass surgery. He wound up getting diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was in 7th grade. So seeing him kind of sick and seeing him, kind of get regress throughout the years, unfortunately, was very scarring to me and definitely spiked my passion for health and fitness. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then I started MBT, just like I said, working for Ernst & Young and seeing, that people were having an issue implementing what we had talked about.
Yeah, so it sounds like, I was kind of looking at some of your work on other podcasts earlier, and there was something that jumped out, especially for this topic, was that, you had you were kind of the go-to guy for this like content, and you were happy to like help people out and give them the information. But, in behavioral economics, it's called the intention-action gap, where just information, motivation does not really correlate with actually doing something about it. So what were some of the things like over time, like, one thing we'll dive into more as we go on is like your business is kind of different than kind of a lot of other health and fitness that is very, very psychology focused and almost like very like deeper psychology focused and really on long-term behavior change. So in the shorter term, like what were kind of those first things when you figured out that there's this gap here where like people just aren't using what I'm giving. So what are the things I can do? How'd you start tackling that problem, and what were kind of the ways you learned different things to try, and how'd you test them out?
Yeah. So, the thing that I felt was missing, was some sort of accountability, really, because again, as you said, I was giving them, they had the knowledge, but they couldn't implement it. And I was like, is there a way to be in communication with these people on a daily basis? And that's when I kind of thought of a program that was offering daily accountability, because as you know, there's a huge difference between knowing what to do and actually doing it on a daily basis. So that's where the idea of daily and personal accountability came into play, and that's what I built the entire company on, is offering that. So that was the basis for everything we've done and do. I mean, we've been offering the same exact thing in terms of the accountability from day one.
And was accountability to sort of like the kind of very obvious where just did people sort of like tell you that's what was kind of missing, or that's what they were struggling with? Or did you start like reading more about the problem, about psychology, and it seemed like that was the most obvious thing to tackle? How'd you kind of get that knowledge, and how'd you kind of test and iterate on it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I guess, so when I was in college, at least where I went, people always were, really into spring break and looking good for spring break. We'd go to, one year we went to Acapulco, then we went to Miami. And the gyms were always, crazy around like February, March, and April. And like I had friends that knew I was into fitness, and I've been into fitness again, like basically my entire life. And they would say, "Hey, can you give me a plan?" And it was the same thing. It was like, but they were all over the country. But we took it one step forward, one step further. It was like, let's check in every week, and that was really helping them, because I would like say, send me pictures and let's see an update. And that idea of the accountability, I don't even know if I called it accountability. It was just like checking in, right? They knew, we would see progress. So I always kind of had that in the back of my mind. So I didn't really read about accountability. It was just more I stumbled on it, and I felt like these partners needed someone to check in on them, because, I also just use my own like life. Like when I was also personally training clients, like there's a difference between when I was there training them versus when I see them in the gym working out alone, right? They just weren't always there. And if they were working out, they weren't working out as hard. So having that accountability definitely raises their game, so to speak.
So did you, in your own experience, like you were the kind of the go-to person for this. Did you become the go-to person like in your own journey with an accountability partner, or were you kind of, you had this sort of just internal drive, and that's kind of what sustained you, and then you saw this where you could kind of provide that to other people?
Interesting. So I always had this internal drive. Again, I think seeing my father be sick at such a young age really scarred me, really had a big impact on me. So I would say a lot of it was probably just fear. I just didn't want to be in a hospital. I didn't want to have open heart surgery. My sister, she always she struggled with her weight. She was a yo-yo dieter. And I kind of hear her scream and cry whenever there was big events. So like that, it was just something I didn't want to deal with. So for me personally, no. But then once I started working and entered the corporate world, I found myself making excuses. I found myself rationalizing a little bit. And that's where I realized, like, wow, like it's not so easy. Like, sure, I guess it's a little easier when you're just in college or high school to be in great shape. But when you're in the real world, there's real stress, obviously, and life gets in the way and work gets in the way. And that's when I kind of really got fascinated by the psychology of it all, because I just found my inner voice kind of being this like devil on my shoulder, where it was always just like, go, go, go. I started to like say, you know what, I might need someone to support me. There has to be a better way here.
Yeah, that's
really
really
interesting.
I just want to dive in that a second. Like, that's a super interesting example, because I think that displays sort of the concept really well. And that you had kind of the internal, and one thing we'll get into later is sort of the kind of emotional, deeper psychology related, like these kind of things. But, you had that internal drive, and it was sort of easy for you compared to a lot of other people. But once you got into a different environment that was sort of more rife with, temptations and ways to get off of that, even you being someone who's kind of naturally driven found like some difficulty with that. And I've kind of noticed something similar myself when like, I'm kind of the same. I'm generally pretty health and fitness motivated. Like, I like working out. I like eating healthy. But when I get super busy or I'm traveling and I get in like environments where that like sort of rhythm gets thrown off, like that definitely goes out the window like faster than I would expect.
Totally.
So that's really just an interesting. I'll let Zarak go to his question, but it's just an interesting example of kind of what you're showing.
No, I mean the question is kind of right exactly about that, which is, do you think that it's more about, like, it's interesting that you, Erik, used the word temptation. I don't know. It didn't really sound necessarily like temptation to me. It's more like you're in an environment where you have more kind of flexibility and you have more maybe like autonomy over your own schedule, and just kind of like more control over that. And so you can say, oh, I'll set aside time to do this. And like, it's easy to make this a priority. And then you're in a new environment, like at work, where you're like, okay, now my schedule is less my own now. And I have to be, I have to respond to clients, and I have to meet with colleagues, and I have to do whatever. And, all that stuff kind of like, it's maybe less of a temptation. It's more just like it just takes bandwidth away from you that you would have been able to maybe kind of dedicate to kind of maintaining fitness. Is that sort of, do you think that that's kind of in line with your experience with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's accurate. I think it's just your environment really impacts you, and your motivations change, your stresses in life change. So I think it's just more to that, I had a lot of other things to worry about. I didn't have as much bandwidth to just focus on going to the gym and, going to the grocery store. My time was limited.
Right.
Like it just became harder. Like there's more friction, even though.
Exactly. I mean, in college, I worried about, school and having fun and, exercising and going and eating well. I mean, I didn't really have much to worry about.
Well, I'm kind of curious, if you see over time people who are using MyBodyTutor, is the and maybe even for yourself, like, do you see the need for like a daily accountability regimen stay the same across time, or do people kind of build habits eventually where it's like, okay, unless there's like a shock to the system, like they're traveling for work or they're in a new environment, they kind of are able to maintain this level of fitness, or do you see like people kind of just, they prefer it, maybe that becomes part of the habit, is having this daily accountability?
Yeah, so the goal for us is really long-term sustainable behavior change, right? And, our goal is truly to create an independence with our clients, for our clients. So really what we try to do, or what we do is we start out, creating behaviors and patterns and eventually that becomes habit. And then the goal is to make sure that is second nature and habitual. No, once our clients get to a certain point, they don't need us anymore, because again, it truly is second nature and habitual. But we also, as kind of Erik touched upon, we really focus on, as we like to say, MPH, mindset, psychology, and habits, because it's not just like a willpower thing. It's not just accountability coaching. We're actually really changing their relationship with food, changing their mindsets, changing their psychology around food and exercise, which really helps to take willpower out of the equation. One of the things I always think about is like, most people, if they start a diet, day one is always way easier than day 30 if they make it that far, right? Day one, you're raring to get going, you're excited. By day 30, you're hanging on by the skin of your teeth, because it's solely willpower. But when you actually change your relationship with food, the way you think and react to food, your habits and behaviors, it really gets easier, and you don't need willpower. And that's why our clients always report, and I know it to be true, that it gets easier and easier for them as time goes on, and that's the goal.
Yeah, day one you're keto. Day 15 you're like, all right, I'll just do slow carb. Day 30 you're just give up.
Exactly.
It's like,
Exactly.
You keep moving down extremes of just like how radical you are with the change. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's like one of my principles of what we do is like, if the way you're eating now doesn't feel sustainable, if the way you're eating now doesn't seem like something you can do in 5 years from now, then it's not going to be sustainable, right? Like if you don't like the way you're living, if you don't like your life now as you're losing weight, then you're never going to be able to sustain it, right? And that's critical. Like so many people are suffering, or they, the first question they have is like, well, when is this over? Like if you're asking those types of questions, then it's not going to lead to long-term sustainable change.
Yeah, and I think that transitions well to like the topic, and we've talked a little bit about there's kind of like obvious barriers, like in a corporate setting like you were in, like all of a sudden just became harder to keep up with stuff, or people just need accountability because like there's too many other things going on, and like those are sort of some of like the obvious environmental things. But I'd like to dive in a little more on that kind of long-term change and like sort of like mindset, relationship with food, stuff like that. In previous podcasts we talked about this in relation to like money, and that like you can get people budgeting and checking their budget app every day, but if they have these kind of deeper held beliefs around like money, then they're kind of never going to really change. So like how have you kind of like adapted that, and what are kind of the things you notice that really drive that longer change, and what are maybe some of the ways that you tend to see most often where those sort of internal beliefs or the kind of subconscious stuff is really holding people back.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about this forever. I mean, really, I guess
we go as long as you want. Yeah.
I guess the first thing is like, what you're talking about almost sounds like self-sabotage, right? Like they can have all the tactics in the world, all the apps in the world. Like let's bring it back to money, but for some reason they're not able to keep a budget, right? And it's like, I always use this example. Like you can have, a business owner. A business owner who wants to grow, who wants to serve more people, they can hire the best coaches in the world. They can read all the business books. They can sign up for the best courses. But if there's a part of a business owner, and think about most business owners, they're already overworked. They feel like they have all the responsibility in the world. They have very little free time. And if they feel that way, and, let's say they hire the best business coach in the world, who's giving them the best tactics in the world. But if subconsciously they feel like them growing is just going to create more responsibility and less free time, then no matter what the business coach tells them, they're never going to succeed, right? Because there's always going to be this constant push-pull, this constant internal battle where they don't believe that their life will be better having a bigger business, right? And same thing with weight loss. If you don't believe your life will be better losing weight at a lighter weight, then you're never going to be able to lose weight. And that's really my definition of self-sabotage is when you fear the very thing you're trying to accomplish, right? When you fear the very thing you're trying to accomplish, you're going to self-sabotage consciously or unconsciously. So that's a big part of what we work on. I mean, because everyone's, most people would say, oh, of course I want to lose weight. I want to look great. But like when you really, kind of open the hood up, there's a lot of stuff going on, right? And, a lot of it is they don't want to give up the comfort of food. They don't want to give up, they feel like if they stop indulging, they lose their identity. A lot of people like to be that guy who's always down for fun. There's so many different things at play that we have to explore, and then ultimately, as we like to say, if you don't confront it, if you don't conquer it, if you don't confront it, you'll never conquer it, right? So there's so many things we have to explore.
Yeah, and I think on that note, what are some of those kind of fears? Because you started touching on them a little bit, and like you said, it feels really counterintuitive at first to say, why would anybody be afraid of getting in shape for some reason? And
right.
Like you said, I think the deeper thing and that relates, and I think this applies to a lot of behavioral changes that we don't think about, is that it's not about just, and the reason why I really like talking with you is because, like you said, to your spring break example, a lot of people will hire a trainer because they want to get ripped for spring break or for their wedding or whatever it is. And then it's they're okay with that short-term time, but then they're kind of done because they don't want to change their lifestyle. But for any positive behavioral change, it's never just that shorter term. It's generally a lifestyle change, and that can be very uncomfortable. So what are some of those kind of lifestyle changes, and how do you find people eventually sort of accept that or realize that and get over it?
Well, I mean, was your question what are things that hold people back, so to speak?
Yeah, what are some of those kind of fears of success, I guess, that people tend to have, and how do maybe some examples of how people have seen that shift where they've gotten over that fear and actually made that long-term change?
Sure. So I would say the number one thing is people don't want to give up the comfort of food. So they come home after a long day or it's during a long day, and they're scared of giving up, their 3 p.m. pack of cookies or M&Ms, they don't want to give that up. Or they don't want to come home and, they feel like they're going to have to eat, grilled chicken and broccoli every night. And, instead of coming home and eating pizza or burgers and fries, there's a big part of that. There's a part of them that feels like they're never going to be able to have fun. They're never going to be able to go with their friends or family and enjoy their favorite food, and I mean, to that point, that's just not true. I mean, as we like to teach and tell our clients, the goal is to be fit and happy, not fit and miserable. But however, there's a big difference between enjoying your favorite food versus using your favorite food, right? And that's a big part of what we work on is enjoying food versus using it. So for example, if you're really stressed after a long day, or you're feeling very emotional, or you're frustrated, or you're anxious, or you're overwhelmed, those are examples of using food. That's, we help clients overcome that, because those are all ultimately the key to being in great shape. The key to being healthy is consistency, right? So anything and everything that gets in the way of consistency, we will tackle, we will work with on our clients. Anyway, so other things, not being able to go to, a beer garden with your buddies because, you're going to be forced to drink water. Again, that's not true. Like, people create these kind of beliefs that are not necessarily true, right? They feel like they're never going to be able to enjoy their favorite food again. They feel like they're going to have to exercise for hours and hours a day. Like, there's just all sorts of things. I had one woman, her husband liked her really big butt. And she was scared that if she lost weight, she'd lose her butt. So like, that's a real thing though, like, because in her mind, like, she wants to be attractive for herself, of course, but also her husband. And she feels like, if she loses weight, then, she's going to lose her butt. So like, that was something we worked on. And we helped her lose weight. We also gave her some exercises and helped her, physically, build her butt. But so that's like another thing. Sadly, we deal with people who, they use being overweight as a way to protect themselves. We've had people who, were kind of molested and we had a few rape cases, and these people in their minds, the less desirable they appear, the more protective they feel. So these are really some deep things that we have to tackle. And those are all reasons why people are fearful of losing weight.
Yeah, and those are interesting. I was just say, like, one example, it sounds like you gave, like, sounds a little funny on the surface or whatever, but like, that's a real concern that like people have, and some are very dark and very painful experiences. And as someone who's trying to facilitate behavior change, like, that's so important to, like, and I imagine it's probably difficult to like really get people to understand that they're feeling those, and even like be able to articulate those. Like, maybe subconsciously they feel those kind of things, but it's hard to articulate. But to actually facilitate the behavior change, like, those are the things that have to be like faced and also like accepted for like you as a coach to like be like, it's okay to feel like this and we can work with it.
Yeah, I mean, we say, we wear many hats, and one of the hats is, kind of part-time therapist.
Yeah.
And just because you really have to kind of own up to, you have to just, you have to tackle this stuff. You really do. Because if you don't, then there's just going to be constant self-sabotage. And I think this is one of the things a lot of books miss, is like this fear of actually reaching your goal. And that's something I've kind of stumbled on in the last, few years. Just because it's like, well, these people have the best game plan in the world. Why aren't they able to stick with it?
Is there an element at all of mindfulness and kind of like, taking a moment to sort of think about the behavior? Like, the what prompted me to think of this or ask the question is, talking about not using your favorite food but enjoying your favorite food. And I was at a conference last week, and one of the presenters was talking about, kind of how you can, use psychology to increase your happiness, right? To like live the good life.
Sure.
And one of the things that she was talking about was, well, you could use, basically be more mindful and kind of like savor the moment. And so it's sort of like, don't just like wolf down your lunch or whatever, like actually like kind of think about it and sort of promote this like notion of savoring. And so I was curious, like if sort of being mindful of stuff is that part of what you focus on or encourage people to do?
Yeah, well, one of our mantras is savor the flavor. We have, we have a very holistic approach. So helping people be more mindful, being conscious of what they're doing, enjoying the flavor, enjoying the texture. We like to challenge our clients to, act as almost if they're a food critic, because one of the most fascinating things is, people will daydream about their favorite food all day long, and then when they're actually eating it, they just kind of shovel it into their mouths. So we really want to promote that, for them to really enjoy it, enjoy the experience, enjoy the texture, enjoy the smell. That's all part of it, certainly, because, one of the things we help our clients do is increase the time between, an impulse and their action, right? So like people will come to us and they'll have an impulse and right away they'll act on it. But by the time they're done with us, they might have an impulse, but they have now another voice to counter that other voice that says, go eat this, go eat this. And that all stems from mindfulness, right? Is learning to develop, a pause and really understanding that, we are not our impulses or thoughts, and that's a big part of the work we do.
Yeah, that's very cool. And also that researcher's name was Laurie Santos. I just wanted to make a plug.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out to Laurie Santos at Yale.
Yeah. So there's a couple things you had touched on that I thought we could expand on a little bit. One is, you mentioned it's really been sort of the last few years where you've sort of really identified that kind of fear of success portion, and that's had a big impact. Has there been other ways, like you said, it sounds like you've taken a very iterative approach, and I think that's interesting because you work directly with people. You're not we talk to a lot of people that are either academics or doing a lot larger studies, or maybe they work with software products and they're kind of working at more larger scale populations of people. But I think your perspective is unique because you work directly with people as clients. So given that, I imagine you pull out a lot of insights like this that you could never pull out by doing some of these other sort of larger scales. So what other things have sort of changed over time in the approach as you've worked directly with people? So it sounds like, a big one has just been really getting that fear of success down. At the beginning, it was just people need some accountability just to stick with it and push through. It's have there been other things you sort of noticed over time and sort of gradually built up as part of the program?
Yeah, we are obsessed with becoming better. We've, hundreds of thousands of data points just because we are working directly with our people and our clients. And the coolest part is it's every single day. But to that point, so it was interesting. When I first started, I thought fear of failure was a big thing, right? And that's what people would tell me. I'm really scared this is going to not work. I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste my money. But what I really noticed is it was actually more of a fear of success. And I think that's actually more common than fear of failure, actually. One of the things we do is offer a money back guarantee. So there you go. There's no reason to have a fear of failure. If it doesn't work, you get your money back in 30 days, done. But even still, is why would someone not do a program that is guaranteed to work? What would hold you back? And that's where I really started to just figure out and think about well, why would these people not do a program that is guaranteed to work? And the more I got to talking to my clients, even successful ones, I just kept noticing this, they were just scared almost to give up their old life. So it's definitely an iterative approach. I'm just trying to think, just our intake questionnaire. So when a client signs up, they fill out a questionnaire. Based on that, we pair them with one of our coaches. So we're up to 30 plus coaches now. I talk to our coaches, throughout the day, every day. And there's just a lot of things. So the way we tailor our coaching. So for example, dieters are notorious perfectionists. They feel if they can't be perfect, then it's not worth trying at all. This, all or nothing mentality. And as I like to say, all or nothing leads to nothing every single time. But based on how they answer that question, we can tailor our coaching to that. Right. So if someone has a really, if they rank themselves high for being a perfectionist, then we're going to absolutely change our coaching to versus someone who, doesn't have that kind of mentality. So we're always looking at ways to improve the experience for our clients and ultimately just get better and better results. I always say I'm a much better coach now than I was a year ago, and I'm a way better coach than I was, when I first started. I'm always improving. That's just something we're always looking at is how we can improve what's getting in the way of people sticking with it, sticking with the program. It's definitely an iterative approach.
How do you kind of approach that? kind of collecting those insights and like acting upon them, because it's like an interesting stuff, because I know I work with like bigger data more, where I'm looking at these kind of bigger populations and stuff people are doing, and we do a little bit of the user research side of things too. But is there a way that you find that you collect those insights the best, or like is it just sort of like anecdotal from the coaches and you just kind of mentally notice patterns over and over? Just like we're going directly with people, how do you sort of collect those insights and decide like how do you change the program to alter that?
Yeah, so it's definitely, again, like we talk with our coaches every single day. So like anything they're telling us, like if it's, an interesting insight, we'll write it down and we'll see what we can do with it. We have a back end, of course, client. So, really what separates our program from the billion other companies out there is that clients are getting daily feedback. So every day throughout the day, they're using our mobile app or website, they're entering their food, they're entering their exercise if it was an exercise day. And then every day after, their very own coach is giving them expert feedback and critique and suggestions. And we can see, how, we could see client success rate. Of course, we could see how often they're reporting. We could see when they're reporting. We could see, what happens if they take a few days off in a row. There's all sorts of patterns that just emerge. And that's, one of the most interesting things is to look at this. And, the coolest part is we see how it ends up. So we see how, what happens, like, for example, we know if a client, isn't reporting as consistently, then obviously they're not going to do good. So one of the things we built in is, well, if the client's not reporting, then, we get the coach and me, we get an automatic trigger that says, hey, this person hasn't reported in a day, let's reach out to them. Like, and that's a simple thing. And I guess it's obvious, but like, that's something we know, like clients who report do better. So how can we make it so we can help clients report? I'm just trying to think of more things. I mean, there's a million things. Another thing, like, in terms of like weigh-ins, we found, generally speaking, people weigh the least on Friday. That's like the lightest weight you'll be all week. So we used to have our weigh-ins on Monday, which is when you're the highest. But intuitively, I thought, we'll weigh you on Monday because it'll keep you in check throughout the weekend, which is usually the biggest challenge. But what I found is people were getting discouraged because they weren't seeing as much weight loss. So we changed it to Friday. They were seeing more weight loss, and then they were actually more motivated throughout the weekend. So that was like an interesting insight and just a change for us, because I originally thought it's like, it will keep you more in check. Mm-hmm. But really, the ultimate motivation is progress and seeing progress. So clients were actually doing better seeing that weight loss on Friday and then going into the weekend. So yeah, that's like one of the examples.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And like, I think too, like you notice, you start trying, I would imagine like tracking those particular things. And when you find some of those smaller actions that people are resisting, that probably starts building up to figuring out what are the stories that are kind of preventing them in the first place, So somebody's just not signed up for a product that, is literally all about daily accountability and like isn't filling it in. Like that's an interesting insight into like what the barriers are that are preventing them from doing this in the first place and why they're getting coaching.
Right. And, again, it sounds obvious, but like that tactical thing was like, we didn't have a mobile app for a long time. Right. And like when I started this company in 2007, people actually used to speak on the phone all the time. People would only use websites. Like, our behavior has changed drastically. So, once we started realizing that, like, we started realizing most of our traffic was coming from mobile. So we had to invest heavily into mobile. We had to reduce the friction to report. So that was one of the things. And then, of course, there's the psychology of it all is like, well, why isn't someone reporting? And then we basically came up with every possible reason why. And then we have, certain kind of triggers that help the coach to diagnose why their client might not be reporting, and then they address it head on. So really, again, anything and everything that gets in the way of consistency and really anything that gets in the way of reporting, we're going to help the client tackle. And that's why, I really believe in our program more than anything, because I know it works. Any barrier mentally or physically that gets in the way, we're going to get through.
So kind of that note, thinking about like how that makes you stand out within your product, like what are some how do you see like the general fitness and health industry like contrast with your approach? Because ever since I've met you and I've known about the business and we talked about it, it seems you're just so unique in that you really focus on, you want them to just solve this problem for life, basically. And your business model is not like contingent on them always needing you, basically, So, do you see this? Are you like really the only one in the space? Because it kind of feels like it, that like looks like that. And like, what are some of like the problems, just the way generally probably the health and fitness industry tries to tackle this problem, whether for good or bad motive?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is scale. We're not trying to build a company that has thousands and thousands and thousands of clients. We're a very boutique company, right? So that in itself gives us an advantage. All the apps, and the thing is, there's so many apps. There's apps that come out all the time that offer quote unquote accountability, but they're doing it at mass scale, right? And it's very hard, to really change your behavior when you don't have someone who really cares. Like accountability, the reason why true accountability works when you have someone who's not only saying good job or bad. I mean, like good job or bad job to me is the most basic form of accountability. It's actually, really diagnosing what's getting in the way. In terms of like competition, like the difference between us, again, I do think is the scale that we're trying to reach. Again, we don't need, tens of thousands of clients for us to feel successful. A lot of it ties in group accountability. So it's like, well, you sign up for this, but you're getting group accountability. But the problem with group accountability is if you don't show up, no one notices, right? Like if you're let's say you're part of a group accountability, like let's say on Facebook, if you don't post for a week or two, chances are no one's going to notice. No one's going to ping you and say, hey, what's up? Right? Like when you have a pro, I call it pro accountability versus peer accountability. Like when you have a pro, someone who's like vested in your success, their success solely relies on your success. It changes the game. It's very, very different. Another thing is like, you have to, of course, like what we were talking about, you have to like go under the hood and figure out what's going on. It's not just we give you a game plan and then we say good job or bad job. Like if a fifth grader can say like this is good food choice, like that's not helpful. Like in this day and age, we all know what to eat for the most part. The question is, why can't we do it? So we've always taken, a very holistic approach. It's not just about the tactics. It's not just about the knowledge. It's about why can't we put that into action? To us, we feel we've solved that with the type of accountability we offer.
Yeah, I've had very similar experiences. I've done accountability for a variety of things, coaching, things like that, and it definitely is all over the map of how well it works. And just like I've found, like even somebody who is really good. So like if I'm, for example, like want somebody to help keep me accountable, go to the gym, and it's a friend who actually goes to the gym a lot, so they're kind of what I aspire to be. It still doesn't really work that great because it's motivation on the accountability person's side too, where like they're really motivated and it's fun in the first week or two to like keep you on track. But then like they get busy and they start forgetting it's not a priority, and there's no like real incentive to keep that up. So like everybody starts kind of reverting back over time. It's like there is like a science to accountability that like actually works.
Yeah, and an example of that though, to that point, is like I use my mom as an example. My mom was a former high school English teacher, right? When it was time for me to take the SATs a long time ago, she used to tutor for the SATs and she tutored me. I didn't take my mom seriously at all, right? Because it was my mom, right? And it's hard for friends to be really honest with one another. It's hard to tell them the brutal and hard truths, right? Like it's hard for a friend to open up and say, hey, I'm really scared to lose weight because I don't want to give up X, or like it's hard. Again, that's the difference between peer accountability and pro accountability.
So yeah, shifting gears a little bit. I know we got about 10 minutes left here, so we'll start kind of wrapping things up. But like, and you kind of mentioned that like scale, and that like you have kind of a niche that you're in. You want to keep it to a certain size. You can give that sort of attention. Do you think it's even like possible to a point to scale? Because like, I think about like what seems like really drives that change for people, and I've noticed this in a lot of other domains too, where it's really kind of that like that deeper kind of psychological stuff, that fear of success, whatever that is, that really kind of prevents people in the long term. And like, I haven't really thought that there's a way to truly scale that. It almost has to be like you have to really want to go get it and find somebody to do it. But like, do you think there are more scalable things that can drive, a lot of people to be healthier in some sort of shorter term? And is there just sort of a limit to like a practicality of how much like anyone could even try to tackle that kind of problem? And just because obviously like health and fitness and obesity and things like that are big problems we face as a society. So it's interesting to think like how could any of these lessons translate in a bigger scale?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I've thought about this a lot. So like, I've heard a lot and I've read a lot of people that like, they're like, I'm trying to crack the code on weight loss, right? Or they say like, I'm cracking the code. Here's the problem though. Ultimately, change by nature is uncomfortable, right? Like if you do what you've always done, it's going to feel comfortable. If you do something differently, by nature, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And there's no way around that. And like you just can't avoid that. That's inevitable, right? And the only way to really help someone get through uncomfortable situations and times is, through heavy support, heavy accountability, heavy guidance, right? So it's really hard to offer someone the type of support and accountability, let's say for $10 a month. And there's a million apps that do that, right? Like that's not going to get you through the tough times. The real challenge is a lot of people sign up for these things, when they kind of feel motivated. But as we know, as you guys certainly know, motivation is so fleeting, right? I mean, look at any gym in January. It's packed by the end of January, early February. It's empty, right? Motivation is fleeting. So like what happens when it's easy when it's easy? What happens when it's not easy? I don't know if there's a way to scale that. I mean, listen, I started this by myself in 2007. Now we're up to 30 plus coaches, right? Like we're doing, one coach at a time. Like, I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to, really to me, the question is, can you make change? How do we make change more comfortable? And I don't know if I think that just by definition, like change is uncomfortable. Again, you do what always done. That's comfortable. If you do something differently, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And one of our mantras is discomfort is our compass, right? If you, when you have a choice, let's say to eat the cookies versus not eat the cookies, and they're, everyday cookies, they're not special cookies. Like if you take the more uncomfortable route, you're going to grow in that process. Like that's getting us closer to where we want to be. So, the question I try to focus on is how do we make change as comfortable as possible? And then perhaps we can create a solution around that.
Yeah, that's a super interesting frame on it. Like, because change is I've never thought about it that way. Like, you have to make change, and you think of this in the behavioral lens. It's like reduce friction, make something easier. Like, and I don't think there's an obvious way to do that from that comfort level. But like you said, you thought about sliding something I think is behavioral. People that are interested in this kind of stuff think about a lot. It is just really, really hard to make any single person change. So, you look at stuff that's just a broader behavioral change, and that so many people have health problems, for that example. It can feel sort of discouraging to think about like how hard it is, but to do those kind of things. But, on that note, I guess on a more positive note, like what are some general like smaller things? Because like you said, there's sort of, it seems like we've talked about there's a number of things. There's sort of environmental stuff. There's like initial motivation, things like that. Are there kind of some smaller things you find have somewhat of an impact on helping people improve behaviors before, and obviously in that longer term sense, like it's really tackling that deeper kind of stuff. But are there kind of smaller barriers, environmental changes that you tend to find, help people out in the beginning at least and start getting people on that right path?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, number one is definitely environment. I mean, you have to, so it's interesting. I think like willpower has gotten a bad rap in the last few years. Like people like, oh, I have no willpower, or I made one decision, I have no willpower left. No, like you can use willpower. And the idea is to use it upfront when you don't need it. And it's to use our limited self-control to put ourselves in situations where we don't need it later on. It's like one of the things you can do is you make your environments easy to succeed, right? You don't get, bonus points for using hero like willpower. So like if you have junk food at home, I mean, this is so obvious, but it's such a good, simple example. If you have junk food at home, then get rid of it, right? And if you have kids, I have two little boys, like, I'm not going to throw away their snacks. But one thing I can do is put all their snacks in one, cabinet. And like that creates, sort of a, that creates a pattern interrupt, like, because I'll put like something there and I know if I know if I'm opening this pantry door, then I'm kind of going down the slippery slope, right? So like there's so many things. Another thing that gets in the way of long-term change and even short-term change is like thinking that, if you can't be perfect, then why bother? And I can't stress this enough. Like the smaller, the better. So many people feel like, if they can't exercise for an hour or if they can't eat perfectly all day long, then it's not worth doing anything. So you know what they do? They would never do anything, right? Because they're stuck in this cycle of, well, doing one small thing is not going to do anything, but I can't do everything I want to do. I can't follow through on my intentions of exercising for an hour or eating perfectly. So they're just stuck in the cycle of inaction. But you have to be realistic with yourself. Like chasing perfection is like chasing the wind. Like you're never going to reach that. You're never going to eat perfectly. You're never going to go to the gym for 2 hours every day. Like that's just like set yourself up to succeed and realize that momentum is, a powerful force. And when it's on your side, it makes all the difference. And when it's against you, it feels like you're, trying to pull an 18-wheeler, from a standstill. So those are small, simple things that really do make a difference.
Yeah, it's a weird psychology that we tend to like go all or nothing on these things. Where like earlier we talked about like, oh, like I want to lose weight, I'm gonna do the ketogenic diet, which is like extreme as you can go, or like exercise. It's like it's not worth me doing 10 push-ups a day. I have to do like 100, or it's not worth it.
Right, and then you do 100 for a few days, and then you inevitably give up because it's just not sustainable, and that's it. Right, or you try to do the keto diet, which most people have no idea actually what the keto diet is or what ketosis is.
It's like eating a lot of fat, yeah.
Right, which is a whole nother topic. But it's actually, the keto diet is by far the hardest diet to comply with. It is very hard to actually be in ketosis. But yeah, like people have these aspirations, and it's like I want to do this, and they wind up doing nothing. So start small, like. The good diet you can stick with is better than the perfect diet you can't stick with. It's just, the 20-minute workout you do is better than the hour workout you don't do. And it sounds like common sense, but it's not common practice, and that's another thing I found is like, I think we often feel like we create these ideas in our head that the solutions have to be these overly complex things. It has to be this crazy thing, but I think there's a part of it ourselves that creates this idea because we're fearful of taking action in the first place, which kind of ties back to the self-sabotage thing, right? Like, I'll talk to a client and they're like, this is so simple, yet it's so profound or so helpful. It's like they always thought, like if we're tackling one thing, and they always thought it was this big complex thing. But I think our brain creates this because it's fearful of change. It really is. Listen, the body's job is homeostasis, right? To protect itself, to remain stable. It doesn't want to change. You're fighting human nature. It's hard.
Yeah, it's similar to like, I work a lot in like the personal finance and like investing space, and people think investing means they need to like be an amateur stockbroker and they need to like track, they need to track the market all the time. They need to like have their risk processing. It's like, no, you just need to buy a target date fund and just put money into it like every month. Like that is all you have to do to like build wealth. But like, people think it can't be that simple. It just seems like it's something that's supposed to be complicated. And I think like, for some of these things, like, and I think I tend to find like fitness and health and then money are the two ways I tend to notice this the most, where we assume complexity means good.
Yep.
It's like a signal of value or quality, and that this is hard, and like, and the financial industry especially preys on that to an extent, where they make a lot of things overly complicated because it kind of communicates value. But it's just it's simpler than it. It's a lot simpler than that.
Totally. Yeah. And simplicity is part of why our program works so well. Is the diet that we give our clients to follow is not overly complex. And to me, the best advice is simple because you can actually act on it, right? Like if you have to read a book to act on something, obviously it's not simple and you're not going to act on it. The goal here is action, right? Consistent action, which leads to consistent results.
Yeah, maybe down the road you do read the book and start doing more of that, but you're not going to do that right away. So like it's something that gets you that momentum going.
Absolutely not. No.
Cool. So we're just about out of time here, so we can kind of wrap things up. Any last questions you got, Zarak, before we go?
Not a question, no. I just think it's really cool that you started this with like, this habit or kind of lifestyle that you were already living and people were coming to you for that, and then you built this company and I'm assuming like kind of throughout, but certainly more and more started to think about how like the psychology of it and how the way people were making these decisions and their behavior influenced their outcomes. And I don't know, I just think that's really cool. It's definitely something that other folks can and should aspire to in their, as they're going out and trying to help people.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's my life's work. It's, besides my family, it's truly what I live for. I intend to do this for the rest of my life. And, the psychology aspect, the MPH, as we like to say, mindset, psychology, habits, it wasn't, I didn't start MBT with that idea. It was really around accountability, but very, very quickly I realized accountability on a daily basis is still not enough if you can't go under the hood and figure out what's getting in the way. And that's where, we really had to raise our game and improve and really figure out what's getting in the way and really think through it on a really deep basis. And it's been fascinating.
Yeah, you're also kind of a living example, as we had talked about, in starting simple. And you're like, oh, people are asking me for advice on this. I should just give them advice and keep them accountable. And look where it turned into. Didn't need a big, complicated business plan or anything, and it just grows from there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. I think before we, one last thing, like any parting thoughts you have, and especially like how can people keep track of your work, see what you're up to, and check out MBT and what you're up to.
Thanks so much. I guess the best bet is to go to mybodytutor.com. If you're interested in improving your health and, if consistency has been an issue, then, I'd love to help you. We have a free course on our website. It's a 7-day free course. Promise it's all value. You'll get some great emails that'll really help you. So check that out. You can get that at on any page of our website. And any questions or whatever, shoot me an email. I really pride myself in being reliable. I love this stuff, and that's pretty much it. And I guess my parting thought would be, small is the new big. Think small.
You need a bumper sticker with that one. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for jumping on with us. It's super valuable, and we'll have people check out your stuff, and we'll link to all this when we post it. And we'll talk more soon. Hopefully, find a lot of more healthier people from here.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right.
Thank you for listening. That concludes this edition of Action Design Radio, hosted by Erik Johnson and Zarak Khan. All podcast episodes are available for download on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Special thanks to Morgan Bortz for design, and as always, we would like to recognize Steve Wendell, founder of the Action Design Network. I am your producer and audio engineer, Zach Simon. For more cutting-edge behavioral science content, visit action-design.org. Once more, that is action-design.org. There, you can sign up for our newsletter and find an in-person event happening near you. We have chapters in over a dozen cities in the United States, plus Toronto. Also, on our website, you can find additional notes and links regarding the topics discussed in today's episode. Once again, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again soon.